Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, September 9, 2025. The Trump administration's Make America Healthy Again, or MAHA Commission, releases a report with strategies to fight childhood chronic disease, focusing more on nutrition and lifestyle changes than government regulations. White House says Donald Trump would be willing to bring in a handwriting expert to show it's not his signature on the suggestive birthday congratulations 20 years ago to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Former researchers at tech giant Meta tell a Senate subcommittee that the company downplayed research on the dangers to children of its virtual reality devices and apps. Discussions ongoing over extending federal government funding past the October 1st deadline to avoid a shutdown. Few signs of an agreement, though, between Republicans and Democrats as of yet. President Trump criticizes Israel for a military attack in Doha, Qatar, targeting Hamas leaders. U.S. House debates the annual defense authorization bill, and a House task force hearing on unidentified anomalous phenomena, UAP, with military veterans telling members they have video of flying things they cannot explain. And subcommittee member Jared Moskowitz, Democrat of Florida, saying, "I don't really know what is true. I do know when we're being lied to, and we are definitely being lied to." NPR reports the Trump administration released a report Tuesday outlining a broad strategy to improve children's health. It calls for a wide range of executive actions and policy reforms aimed at tackling a rise in chronic disease. In announcing the report, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. called chronic disease in kids an existential crisis for our country and said the report's 128 recommendations are historic and unprecedented. The Make America Healthy Again Commission, led by Kennedy, identified 4 potential drivers behind rising rates of chronic disease among children, including poor diet, chemical exposure, lack of physical activity, and chronic stress, as well as over-medicalization. That was from NPR. During the news conference, Secretary Kennedy spoke about key strategies to improve children's health by the end of the year.
And the accomplishments we're going to have by the end of the year are going to be historic and unprecedented, including removing harmful chemicals from our food, including the 9 petroleum-based food dyes. We'll either have removed them or have committed deadlines to remove them. Defining for the first time ultra-processed food, the front of package labeling for ultra-processed foods, requiring nutrition and metabolic health courses in medical schools, something that is not happening except in a very limited way today. Closing the grass loophole, improving food for our military, our schools, and our hospitals, updating water quality standards, including PFAS, removing Medicaid quality metrics to measure real health improvements through fitness and nutrition, working across the government to provide more assistance to farmers to support soil health, unleash innovation, and remove the barriers that hamper small farms, reforming SNAP by working with states to remove soda and candy from the program. And I want to thank Brooke for her very, very aggressive work and encouraging states to, which we've gone all across the country talking to governors and legislatures, to encourage states to file SNAP waiver petitions, establishing, again, front-of-pack food labeling for sugars, for sodium, for ultra-processed foods, reforming infant formula standards, and acknowledging and addressing vaccine injuries. These are bipartisan reforms. Many of them would be unthinkable 2 years ago. We are focusing narrowly on nutrition and metabolic health, food quality, cumulative exposures, gut microbiome, precision agriculture, and mental health. And we're doing all these things with each other cooperatively, and we're doing them very, very quickly.
Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at today's news conference on the release of the Make America Healthy Again report focusing on children. He mentioned the GRAS loophole, that's GRAS, which stands for Generally Recognized as Safe. It's a voluntary Food and Drug Administration system established 20 years ago, allowing food and chemical companies to self-declare new food ingredients as safe. Article from Reuters on this report reads, it notably stopped short of recommending changes to U.S. agrochemical approval or regulatory processes, a key demand of some MAHA activists. Rather, the report says the Environmental Protection Agency will work to build public confidence in its pesticide review process and reform its agrochemical approval process to ensure their timely availability to farmers. That was from the article at Reuters, and this was the topic of one of the first questions to Secretary Kennedy. You're also going to hear an answer from EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin.
My name is Lisa Desjardins. I'm from the PBS NewsHour. Also the mom of a 9-year-old, so you have my attention already. 2 questions. One, pesticides has been something that you've mentioned as a concern. You mentioned the 6 pesticide applications that you rejected. I believe that's out of thousands, though. There are some who shared that concern, who expected this report to be more critical, to do more specific on pesticides. Can you answer that concern? And the other is a debate over children's health. You mentioned suicides, especially among teenagers. There is a debate over mental health and firearms in this country and the impact on children's health. Was there ever a discussion of looking at firearms and the health of our children related to that? So those 2 questions, pesticides and firearms. Thank you.
I'll answer the question. The firearms question, we're doing research. You know, the firearms question is a complex question, and it's not an easy question. The violence is what we're concerned with. This sudden onset of violence that began in the 1990s, where people would do something that has never been happened in history, which is somebody walks into a school or a church or a theater and starts shooting strangers. We had lots of guns when we were kids. We had comparably the same number of guns. Nobody was doing that. We had gun clubs at my school. Kids brought guns to school and were encouraged to do so. And nobody was walking into schools and shooting people. And this is not happening in other countries. Switzerland has a comparable number of guns as we do, and the last mass shooting they had was 23 years ago. We're having mass shootings every 23 hours. Oh, there are many, many things that happened in the 1990s that could explain these. One is the dependence on psychiatric drugs, which is, in our country, is unlike any other country in the world. It could be, there could be connections with video games, with social media. There are a number of things, and we are looking at that at NIH. So we are doing studies now. We're initiating studies to look at the correlation and the connection, potential connection between over-medicating our kids and this violence, and these other possible co-founders as well. Your other question, you want to answer later?
EPA is committed to using the best available science, and you heard that from a number of our speakers today, the importance of seeking out the gold standard of science. As I covered during my remarks, we are concerned from an enforcement standpoint, the use of illegal pesticides, the importing of pesticides into the country, and working with other partner agencies to crack down on that. You heard Mr. Kratsios talking about AI, and I'm grateful for his leadership on that front. We're incorporating important IT upgrades and AI upgrades inside the chemical office. We inherited a backlog in January of 14,000 pesticide reviews. That was the backlog. 500 in the new chemical reviews.
EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin and Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. at today's news conference release of the Make America Healthy Again Commission report on children. Also in attendance are the commission members, Ag Secretary Brooke Rollins, NIH Director Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, FDA Commissioner Dr. Martin McCary, the new head of the CDC, and others. You can find the entire video at cspan.org. This is Washington Today. Story from NBC News. President Donald Trump declined to discuss the letter to convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein that House Democrats released on Monday, calling it a dead issue. I don't comment on something that's a dead issue, Trump told NBC News in a brief phone call Tuesday morning. I gave all comments to the staff. It's a dead issue. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee posted on X an image of a lewd note Trump allegedly sent Epstein for his 50th birthday. The letter was part of a slew of documents released Monday, which stemmed from a subpoena the GOP-led committee sent to Epstein's estate. The president has denied that he wrote the letter. White House officials on Monday dismissed it, arguing that the signature did not match the president's current signature. Earlier instances of the president's signature, though, appear similar to the signature on the letter. That was from NBC News. This was one of the topics today at the White House briefing with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
About the Epstein case, would the White House support a professional handwriting expert review of the document released yesterday to prove that it's not the president's signature?
Sure, we would support that. And in fact, I have already seen many forensic analysts of signatures coming out. I believe it was the Daily Signal that published a piece with 3 separate signature analysts who said that this absolutely was not the president's authentic signature. And we have maintained that position all along. The president did not write this letter. He did not sign this letter. And that's why the president's external legal team is aggressively pursuing litigation against the Wall Street Journal, and they will continue to.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt later in her news conference in the White House briefing room, she was asked about the president's views on Epstein's victims.
And the Epstein files are back in the news because a lot of Americans feel that that Jeffrey Epstein's victims never got justice. Does the president care about these victims? Do you think he can does he want to deliver more justice for them, and is he willing to meet with them?
The president cares about victims of all crimes, and that's why Republicans in the Trump Department of Justice have done more in terms of transparency when it comes to the Epstein case than any prior administration. And why are the Democrats all of a sudden caring about this? It's because they are desperately trying to concoct a hoax to smear the president of the United States. We have seen this time and time again. Ro Khanna and all of these other Democrats, they could have cared about those victims 4 years ago. When Joe Biden was in office, they could have pushed for transparency then. Unfortunately, the Democrats are using victims as political pawns to try to smear and to push a hoax against the president of the United States. And I will get you numbers on the amount of child predators that this administration and this FBI and this Department of Justice have locked up under President Trump's leadership. We have done more than any president to protect victims of crime, especially disgusting, heinous sexual crimes. And that includes the deportation of illegal aliens who are perpetrating these crimes against innocent victims in our country right now today. And that remains a top priority for this administration.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt taking reporters' questions in the White House briefing room. Congressman James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, chair of the Oversight and Reform Committee, which just released documents related to Jeffrey Epstein, including the birthday book with messages purported to be from President Donald Trump, former President Bill Clinton, and others, spoke to reporters this morning outside the private meeting of House Republicans.
Can you give us a comment about the Epstein documents being released and what else is under review right now?
Well, the Epstein documents are released because I subpoenaed the estate for the documents. That's why we have the documents. So I know the media has been obsessed with the discharge petition. The discharge petition didn't even cover the estate. This is a serious investigation, just like I said it would be. We're going to be transparent. I think we got the documents uploaded last night on the computer. It takes, a few hours. Obviously, when I subpoena documents, they send them to the Republicans and the Democrats. Of course, the Democrats, they find one thing in there and they promote it and try to get a narrative. This investigation is about providing justice and accountability for the victims. And the Democrats, it's really disappointing to see how they've acted. I mean, Garcia, he's been on the job for about 2 weeks. He's proven to me to just be a real big drama queen because this is all about providing transparency to the American people and justice for the victims. It's not about scoring political points. So hopefully he'll mature up and get serious about the investigation. We've got a lot more documents we expect to get in. We're going to bring a lot of people in for depositions. So this investigation is moving along very rapidly, and hopefully we'll get some answers and some justice very soon.
Congressman James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, chair of the Oversight Committee, meeting with reporters this morning. He was referring to Congressman Robert Garcia, Democrat from California, ranking member on the committee. And the discharge petition effort to force release of all Epstein files is being led by Republican Congressman Thomas Massie of Kentucky and Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California. Congressman Khanna quote tweeting a Politico reporter, Conor O'Brien, tweet that reads, House Rules Committee, Republicans vote down a Democratic bid to force a floor vote on the Massie-Khanna legislation to force the release of the Epstein files. And Congressman Khanna adding, this can't stop us. We have 218 who stand with the survivors to hold pedophiles accountable. And that could happen after two special elections this month to fill vacant U.S. House seats, expected to be Democratic victories, providing the final 2 signatures needed for that discharge petition to be successful and bring the bill directly to the floor, getting around the congressional leadership of the Republicans who normally control the floor schedule. Congressman Khanna was on CNN Monday night talking about the Epstein files.
I think the Vice President Vance, should be asked to retract what he said, defaming the Wall Street Journal reporter. He said it was fake. Now we have the letter. And I also hope that the lawsuit will be withdrawn against that journalist, $10 billion lawsuit, now that there is the letter.
So, okay, on that front, you were the one who initially requested the Epstein birthday book, right? And you requested that back in July, Congressman Khanna. And we all see it. I'll put it up here, signed with Trump's name. It says a Powell is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret, wrapped with a drawing of what appears to be a naked woman, the signature falling in obviously a significant spot there. So Trump has vehemently denied the letter, and the White House press secretary says it's very clear President Trump did not draw this picture and he did not sign it. So when it comes to withdrawing that defamation lawsuit, as you were saying, it looks like they're tripling down. I mean, do you have any reason to doubt, after getting this from the Epstein estate, that is Trump's signature, Trump's drawing?
There's no reason for us to doubt it. The Wall Street Journal reported that they believe it is Donald Trump's signature. And the sad thing here is that this is hurting the survivors. I just heard from the survivors' lawyer. Many of them bravely told their stories. And they find that every time that President Trump attacks things as a hoax or as false, it's really disrespecting them. No one really cares about the details of the letter. Yes, it's crude and it's unfortunate. The bigger issue is the transparency and justice for the survivors. And I wish President Trump would just listen to the survivors. I wish he would meet them. That's what they've asked for. And I wish he would just direct for the release of the full files like he promised the American people. This is not against him. It's not an effort to embarrass him. This is to stand to protect America's children and to stand with our survivors.
Congressman Ro Khanna, Democrat from California, interviewed on CNN Monday night. BBC News writes Lord Mandelson called the late convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein his best pal, according to a letter in an alleged birthday book that's been released by U.S. lawmakers. In the message for Epstein's 50th birthday in 2003, Lord Mandelson, the United Kingdom's ambassador to the U.S. since last year, described him as an intelligent, sharp-witted man who parachuted into his life. An official spokesperson for Lord Mandelson told the BBC that he has long been clear that he very much regrets ever having been introduced to Epstein. That was from BBC News. This is Washington Today. From the Washington Post, 2 former and 2 current employees have turned over thousands of pages of internal documents to Congress they allege show Meta suppressed research about safety risks for children on the company's virtual reality devices and apps. The Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Privacy, Technology, and the Law held a hearing about it today with testimony from the 2 former Meta researchers. One is Jason Sadazan.
In the fall of 2021, Frances Haugen disclosed to Congress how Meta's products fuel mental health issues for teens, including body dysmorphia and self-harm. Meta's immediate response to congressional concern was not to do the right thing, but rather roll out new processes and policies to manipulate, control, and erase data. We researchers were directed how to write reports to limit risk to Meta. Internal work groups were locked down, making it nearly impossible to share data and coordinate between teams to keep users safe. Mark Zuckerberg disparaged whistleblowers claiming past disclosures were, quote, used to construct a false narrative. Despite Meta's attempts to prevent researchers from collecting necessary insights, the research we were able to do continued to show the dangers of Meta's products on users. This only highlights the sheer scale, severity, and prevalence of harm on these Meta products. In early 2022, I moved to Meta's Reality Labs to lead integrity research and help improve those using Meta's VR headsets. Virtual reality allows someone to wear a headset and experience an alternate reality, to play games, watch movies, socialize with others. For Meta, VR is designed to push socialization above all, as Meta saw this as a path to unbridled engagement and profit. The company invested billions, integrated social media like Instagram into headsets, and even rebranded as, quote, Meta to align with the future of the company. From my first days in Reality Labs, Meta leadership and legal teams were in complete control of the research I was conducting. This was crucial research because this was a largely untested technology, but I soon learned that Meta had no interest in VR safety unless it could drive interaction and thus profit. After Meta VR sales were banned in Germany for 2 years over concerns about how Meta treats user data, in 2022, Germany allowed sales to resume. When I was asked to perform research in Germany, I understood that Meta was trying to show that their VR headsets were safe for German users. However, when our research uncovered that underage children using Meta VR in Germany were subject to demands for sex acts, nude photos, and other acts that no child should ever be exposed to, Meta demanded that we erase any evidence of such dangers that we saw. Despite Meta's attempts to hide these sensitive findings, my research still revealed emotional and psychological damage, particularly to women who were sexually solicited, molested, or worse. In response, Meta demanded I change my research in the future to not gather this data on emotional and psychological harm. When my colleagues' research showed the emotional impact of children being threatened by physical harm by strangers online, Meta not only restricted internal sharing, but manipulated reports to obscure any emotional damage.
Jason Sadazan, former researcher at Meta, testifying today before the U.S. Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Privacy, Technology, and the Law. Again, from the Washington Post article, a Meta spokeswoman told the Post that the allegation that Meta curtailed research is based on a few examples, quote, stitched together to fit a predetermined and false narrative, and that the company has had no blanket prohibition on research about people under 13. USA Today writes that President Donald Trump's Operation Midway Blitz is hitting a fever pitch as local leaders claim immigrants are wrongfully being snatched off the street by federal agents looking to root out violent criminals. The White House vehemently argues that the Chicago operation is aimed at targeting undocumented immigrants who have committed crimes, but local community members say it's causing fear among law-abiding neighbors. At least 4 people have been arrested, according to the Department of Homeland Security. That was from USA Today. The governor of Massachusetts, Democrat Maura Healey, today accused Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, of targeting people at churches when the services are being conducted in Spanish. U.S. Border Czar Tom Homan says that's not true. First, Governor Healey this morning on MSNBC.
I'm a former prosecutor, an AG. I put bad guys away, okay, including those who were, trafficking drugs and human beings and the like. But here's what's really going on. With these ICE efforts, now they're deployed here in Boston. This is all part of the theater of the Trump administration to distract from the lousy job they're doing on the economy. Can you imagine? So this is a true story. This past Sunday, at Boston College, just outside of St. Ignatius Church on the campus there, ICE agents parked during a Spanish mass. No. Why the hell are they there? They're there to intimidate, right? They're there to sow fear. They're there to scare people. In the same way, the Trump administration is about scaring corporations and universities and law firms. I'm proud of the people that are speaking up, that are, standing up. But this isn't right. It's not normal. And by the way, it undermines public safety, as you all have talked about in the past.
Governor Maura Healey, Democrat from Massachusetts, on MSNBC this morning. Later, the U.S. Border Czar responded as he spoke to reporters outside the White House.
And let me tell you what's happened in Boston, where Governor Healey got on TV this morning talking about ICE doing operations at churches, which is a bold-faced lie. 4 people out of many we've arrested in Boston last few days. Victor Gomez Perez, a 33-year-old criminal alien from Guatemala, with charges for aggravated rape, assault and battery with a dangerous weapon, indecent assault and battery on a victim 14 years or older, assault and battery on a police officer, and a conviction for assault. They arrested Kelly Espinosa Viana, a 34-year-old criminal alien from Colombia, with charges of aggravated assault on a pregnant victim. They arrested Joshua Gonzalez Baez, a 23-year-old criminal alien from Dominican Republic, with pending charges for trafficking heroin, morphine, opium, resisting arrest by an officer, disorderly conduct, and drug distribution. They arrested Samuel Barrera, a 20-year-old criminal illegal alien from Guatemala, with pending charges for assault and battery on a child. This is what ICE is doing across the country. They're targeting the worst of the worst, and they're making this country safe again. President Trump promised the American people he'd make this country safe again. Every public safety threat, every national security threat ICE is taking on the street makes that community safer. Shame on Governor Healy and Mayor Wu. Shame on both of them. They should be calling the White House thanking President Trump, thanking ICE for making their communities safer. But instead, they get on national TV and lie about ICE and make these accusations that it is a big part of the reason why there's 1,000% increase on assaults on ICE agents. Facts matter. And that's why I stop here every day and talk to you all to get the facts out there.
U.S. Border Czar Tom Homan in the White House driveway with reporters. Story from NBC News: for more than 15 years before they conducted any operation to arrest an immigrant in the United States, officers with Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Removal Operations Division have been required to fill out a form with details about their target: name, appearance, known addresses, and employment, immigration history, any criminal history, and more, and give it to a supervisor for approval. This year, in a sign of how the agency has moved from target enforcement to broad street sweeps under the Trump administration, that policy has been ended. 6 current and former officials and agents of ICE and the Department of Homeland Security told NBC News. President Donald Trump's crime emergency order in the District of Columbia that invoked the Home Rule Act provision to put the federal government in charge of D.C. police expires Wednesday, end of 30 days. U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, was asked today why he does not plan to bring to a vote legislation to extend it.
The D.C. national emergency expires tomorrow. I know that you said yesterday that it's not necessary to extend it at this time, but there are some members of your conference who would like to see the president's emergency powers in D.C. expanded for a longer time than 30 days. Do you expect that to get a vote on the floor this year?
No, I'm among them, but my understanding is that the current status of it is that the Democrat mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, wisely welcomed the assistance, and she said effectively, is that the way I read that or understood it was an indefinite welcome, Matt, to keep the crime low. We all benefit from that. Every single person in this room benefits from that. You can walk home safely tonight. We couldn't have told you that several weeks ago. So no one's calling on Congress yet to act on that. And I think if you have an agreement, my understanding is an agreement between the White House and the local leadership, then I'm not sure Congress has any necessity to do anything. So we'll see how that plays out.
U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson at a news conference today. While the federal oversight of D.C. police will end, it is expected the surge of federal law enforcement and National Guard troops on the streets of Washington will continue for now. Story from the Washington Examiner: a group of 10 North Carolina Republicans is calling for the removal of State Magistrate Judge Teresa Stokes, accusing her of misconduct after she released a repeat offender who allegedly went on to kill a 23-year-old woman on a Charlotte light rail train. In a letter sent Tuesday to the Chief District Judge Roy Wiggins, obtained by the Washington Examiner, the 10 Republican members of Congress urged formal removal proceedings under North Carolina law, citing what they called willful and persistent failure by Stokes to protect the public. They said her decision to release DeCarlos Brown Jr. without bond earlier this year directly enabled the fatal stabbing on the Charlotte area transit system. That was from Washington Examiner. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, in her news conference today at the White House, in her opening statement, spoke about this case and also how the news media has been covering it.
The most enraging and unacceptable part of this story is that her death was entirely preventable. DeCarlos Brown never should have been on that train that night. In fact, he should have been behind bars. DeCarlos Brown has been charged with crimes no fewer than 14 times, dating back to 2011, including for armed robbery, felony larceny, breaking and entering, and shoplifting. Brown had previously served 5 years in prison for a robbery with a deadly weapon charge, and he had also forfeited bonds 3 different times, twice in 2014 and once in 2023. Despite all of this past documented criminal history, when Brown was arrested yet again in January of this past year, a Democrat judge, who I will add was a strong supporter of former Vice President Kamala Harris, released this insane criminal once again without requiring him to pay any bail. He simply had to sign a written promise to return for his court hearing. Think about how crazy it is to ask a career criminal, someone who by definition repeatedly breaks the law, to just sign a written promise and come back again another day. This is madness. This monster should have been locked up, and Arena should still be alive. But Democrat politicians, liberal judges, and weak prosecutors would rather virtue signal than lock up criminals and protect their communities. And perhaps most shamefully of all, the majority of the media, many outlets in this room, decided that her murder was not worth reporting on originally because it does not fit a preferred narrative. Many of the journalists in this room spilled plenty of ink trying to smear Daniel Penny for defending a subway car from a deranged lunatic in New York City, but none of those same reporters lift a finger to write stories about an actual murderer.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, part of her opening statement at today's news conference at the White House. Washington Examiner article says that DeCarlos Brown Jr., 34 years old, who had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, was arrested in January after repeatedly calling 911 and insisting that officers examine what he described as man-made substances inside his body that he believed were controlling his movements. When police declined to investigate, Brown became agitated and was charged with a misdemeanor, according to reports. 7 months later now, he's charged with murder. Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles, a Democrat, putting out a statement. This is a tragic situation that sheds light on problems with society's safety nets related to mental health care and the systems that should be in place. While I do not know the specifics of the man's medical record, what I have come to understand is that he has long struggled with mental health and appears to have suffered a crisis. This was the unfortunate and tragic outcome. That statement from Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles. And some news from Jefferson City, Missouri, from Associated Press. The Republican-led House turned aside Democratic objections Tuesday and passed a plan backed by President Donald Trump to redraw the state's congressional districts so Republicans could win almost all of them. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea. It's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. Punchbowl News co-founder John Bresnahan, writing on X, House Democrats had an angry caucus meeting this morning over government funding and a possible shutdown. Rank-and-file Dems want party leaders, especially Schumer, that's referring to the Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, to be willing to shut down the government in order to get what they want on Obamacare and Medicaid. That's the post from John Bresnahan. October 1st is the start of the new fiscal year, and while the Republicans in the House can pass a government funding extension on their own with their majority of just a couple of votes, Senate Republicans need some Senate Democrats to vote with them to overcome a filibuster and reach 60 votes in the Senate. Here's the latest from the Senate leaders. We begin with John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, the majority leader.
Have you received a substantive offer from Democrats on what they want? And given the inevitability of some sort of CR, do you want it to go through later this year, maybe November or December, or into next year?
Well, we have not received an offer from the Democrats. The answer to that is no. But we have a very narrow window here in which to do this. And I'm hoping that we can get to work on a CR to fund the government in the foreseeable future. What that date is, we hear November from the House. The White House seems to be trending in that direction. But we're going to need a continuing resolution that enables us, gives us the time that we need to continue and hopefully finish the appropriations process. I've maintained all along, as you all know, that the best way to fund the government is through regular order, and that's through passing appropriations bills. That's not something the Democrats did when they had the majority, but it's something that we intend to do. But it's going to need a little bit more time, obviously, because with the window closing now between now and September 30th, we will need a short-term continuing resolution. And how long that goes for, what anomalies it might carry, are all things that can be negotiated. But the direct answer to your question is we haven't received an offer yet from the Democrats related to that.
The Senate Majority Leader, John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, speaking to reporters at a news conference in the U.S. Capitol building. The Senate Democratic leadership also held a news conference today, and here is the Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer of New York.
For weeks now, Leader Jeffries and I have been asking Leader Thune and Speaker Johnson to meet with us, to start negotiating, keep the government funding. We've heard nothing, crickets. As Senator Murray can tell you, the only way to avoid a shutdown is to work in a bipartisan way. And that's what we are trying to do. But Republicans are once again threatening to go at it alone, which will lead our country straight into a shutdown, a Republican-caused shutdown, because they refuse to work together. Democrats don't want a shutdown. We want bipartisan negotiations in a bipartisan bill, where we can have some real input into undoing so many of the bad things that have been done by this administration. If Republicans want to keep the government open, they've got to work with Democrats in a bipartisan way. That's the only way to get it done. The polling data shows that the people blame Trump for not talking to us, and that's why they blame him for a shutdown. If Republicans continue to go at it alone, if they refuse to be reasonable, if they close the door on negotiations, then any shutdown is going to be on them. Time's short.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, at a news conference. From Reuters, the White House is seeking legislation that would extend current federal funding until January 31st, avoiding a partial government shutdown beginning October 1st. Republican U.S. House Representatives Majority Leader Steve Scalise said on Tuesday. Scalise told reporters that was a suggestion. We're still working on the dates and how long it would extend, but that hasn't been finalized yet. That was from Reuters. Wall Street today, the Dow up 196, NASDAQ up 80, S&P up 17. The U.S. labor market, begins a Washington Post article, was much weaker during much of 2024 and early 2025 than data initially showed, a new government report indicated Tuesday, adding more uncertainty into the economy and fueling a raging debate over the figures that analysts use to understand it. In the largest preliminary revision to jobs data on record, the Bureau of Labor Statistics said employers had created 911,000 fewer positions from April 2024 to March 2025 than previously reported. That's less than half as many as the agency had initially indicated. The data will be revised again and finalized early next year. That was from the Washington Post. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt writing, today the BLS released the largest downward revision on record, proving that President Trump was right. Biden's economy was a disaster and the BLS is broken. From CNBC, the Supreme Court on Tuesday granted the Trump administration's request to hear its appeal of lower court rulings that many of President Donald Trump's wide-ranging tariffs are illegal. The Supreme Court also agreed with the administration's request to consider the appeal on a faster-than-normal timeline. The court said it would hear oral arguments in the first week of November. That was from CNBC. This is Washington Today. Another AP story, Hamas says its top leader survived the Israeli strike on Qatar and that 5 lower-ranking members died. A Qatari security personnel was also killed, the Hamas statement said. Hamas, which has sometimes only confirmed the assassination of its leaders months later, offered no immediate proof of its top leaders surviving. Israel launched a strike targeting Hamas's leadership in Qatar on Tuesday as they considered a U.S. proposal for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. Strike on the territory of a U.S. ally marked a stunning escalation and risked upending talks aimed at winding down the war and freeing hostages. That was from AP. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, asked for the reaction.
Regarding the Israeli strike in Doha, how much time or how much of a heads up did the U.S. get, and does the president support the strike?
Sure. Well, I have a statement to read for all of you with respect to the Israeli strike in Doha, and here it is. This morning, the Trump administration was notified by the United States military that as Israel was attacking Hamas, which very unfortunately was located in a section of Doha, the capital of Qatar. Unilaterally bombing inside Qatar, a sovereign nation and close ally of the United States that is working very hard and bravely taking risks with us to broker peace, does not advance Israel or America's goals. However, eliminating Hamas, who have profited off the misery of those living in Gaza, is a worthy goal. President Trump immediately directed Special Envoy Witkoff to inform the Qataris of the impending attack, which he did. The president views Qatar as a strong ally and friend of the United States and feels very badly about the location of this attack. President Trump wants all of the hostages in Gaza and the bodies of the dead released, and this war to end now. President Trump also spoke to Prime Minister Netanyahu after the attack. The Prime Minister told President Trump that he wants to make peace, and quickly. President Trump believes this unfortunate incident could serve as an opportunity for peace. The president also spoke to the Emir and Prime Minister of Qatar and thanked them for their support and friendship to our country. He assured them that such a thing will not happen again on their soil.
And to be clear, the president disagrees with the location of the strike and that he passed that along to Prime Minister Netanyahu.
The president just confirmed that in the statement that I just read to you, which I spoke with him about before coming out here.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at her news conference at the White House. The state of Qatar condemns in the strongest terms the cowardly Israeli attack targeting the residential headquarters of several members of the Hamas political bureau in the Qatari capital, Doha. Begins a posting on X from Qatar's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. It goes on, this criminal attack constitutes a flagrant violation of all international laws and norms and a serious threat to the security and safety of Qataris and residents of Qatar. U.S. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, ranking member on the Foreign Relations Committee, was asked about this strike at an event today hosted by the Council on Foreign Relations.
Hi, Senator. Thanks for doing this. Rishi Iyengar from Foreign Policy Magazine. I wanted to follow up on the strikes in Doha this morning. How do you think the U.S. should respond now to Israel, and what impact do you think this has on Qatar's ability to mediate in that conflict?
As I said, I haven't been briefed on what happened. Mike, I understand so I don't know whether Israel took out the Hamas leader that they were trying to take out. I don't know. You may know better than I do because you may have seen the news recently. So I don't know what the outcome was. I don't know if they notified the Qataris before they took that strike so that they knew. And so I would like to get some more information. But what we do know is that it's a significant escalation. And it comes on the heels, as I said, of bombing in Syria, of bombing in Lebanon. And so I would hope that we are going to have conversations about that escalation and about how to reduce the threat of escalation instead of increasing it.
Senator Jeanne Shaheen, Democrat from New Hampshire, ranking member on the Foreign Relations Committee, an event today in Washington hosted by the Council on Foreign Relations. In a joint statement, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Defense Minister Israel Katz said airstrikes targeting Hamas leadership in Doha were completely justified in light of the fact that this Hamas leadership was the one who initiated and organized the October 7th massacre and has not stopped launching murderous actions against the state of Israel and its citizens since then, including taking responsibility for the murder of our citizens in yesterday's attack in Jerusalem. Both the U.S. House and Senate are working this week on the annual defense authorization bill known as the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. As Military Times article puts it, trying to navigate through hundreds of member amendment proposals and adopt final drafts to be used in upcoming conference negotiations. Congressman Mike Rogers, Republican from Alabama, chair of the Armed Services Committee, opened the debate today on the House floor.
The bill before us today carries a different short title than the typical NDAA.
It is the Streamlining Procurement for Effective Execution and Delivery Act, or SPEED Act. We did that to underscore the very significant reforms this bill makes to the department's acquisition process. The Pentagon's current acquisition process is failing our warfighters. It can take 10 years between identifying a need and delivering the capability to the warfighter. By that time, the threat has changed, the costs have ballooned, and the solution is outdated. The SPEED Act will cut through layers of red tape and deliver for the warfighter at speed and scale. It accelerates the requirements process from nearly 3 years down to 90 days. It streamlines bureaucracy. It prioritizes commercial solutions and fosters an environment where innovation can flourish by removing barriers to entry and bridging the valley of death. It modernizes outdated and overly burdensome regulations that slow delivery and inflate costs. And most importantly, it drives much-needed cultural change. No more rewarding paper pushers over problem solving. The SPEED Act fosters a culture of agility and responsible risk-taking. We work closely with the administration on this effort, and I'm pleased to say they support it. Fixing acquisitions will go a long way toward ensuring our warfighters are the most capable fighting force on the planet. Properly equipping our warfighters is critical, but so is ensuring we recruit and retain the best and brightest. Towards that end, the FY26 NDAA continues to make improvements in the quality of life for our service members. This bill supports the Trump administration's 3.8% pay raise for all service members, authorizes nearly $3 billion for construction of barracks, family housing, dining facilities, medical facilities, child care centers, and schools, prevents the department from reducing health care billets to avoid shortages at medical facilities, and it improves service member access to mental health services. Our committee will continue to make improving the quality of life for service members a priority. We need a ready, capable, and lethal fighting force because the threats our nation faces, especially those from China, are more complex and challenging than any point in the last 40 years.
Congressman Mike Rogers, Republican from Alabama, the Armed Services Committee chair on the House floor, starting the debate on the National Defense Authorization Act, the NDAA. The House Rules Committee made in order about 300 amendments that can be offered during this debate. Connor O'Brien, a defense reporter with Politico, writing that the amendments allowed include limiting gender-affirming care, 2002 and 1991 AUMF repeal, that's authorization for use of military force, and cutting Ukraine and Taiwan aid. No votes on Democratic amendments to rein National Guard use, War Department renaming, base names, and Venezuela conflict. On the House floor today, Congresswoman Sarah McBride, Democrat from Delaware, the only transgender member of Congress, spoke about amendments she wanted to offer and was not allowed.
I know a few members of this chamber can't seem to muster any maturity when they have a transgender colleague, but members of the U.S. Armed Forces can and have. For years, transgender people have been serving in our military. There was no problem until Donald Trump decided to fire thousands of qualified, capable service members simply because of their gender identity. These service members were proudly serving, arm in arm with their peers, deploying, training, leading, and sacrificing. They met the same standards, passed the same tests, earned the same promotions, and they were praised by their commanding officers. There was no problem until the Trump administration created a problem, removing thousands of loyal patriots from service, squandering investments made in their training and careers, and disrupting lives and units. That's why I introduced an amendment to repeal this ban. Because this ban doesn't strengthen our military, it weakens it. It doesn't uphold our values, it betrays them. And it sends the cruelest message to some of our most devoted patriots, that one identity they hold matters more than their service. My second amendment restores retirement benefits to transgender veterans who were forced out of the armed forces just shy of 20 years of service. Under the law, they should qualify for early retirement benefits just like everyone else. Many received approval only to have it revoked simply because of their gender identity. They wore the uniform. They kept their promises to us. It's time we keep our promises to them. It's one thing for some of my colleagues to disrespect me, but it's another thing entirely to disrespect the people who lay down their lives for this country. Unfortunately, the majority in this body refuses to let us vote on these amendments. But I will not stop standing up for every patriot that serves our country, which until now I thought was a non-controversial and bipartisan idea.
Congresswoman Sarah McBride, Democrat from Delaware, on the House floor. You can follow the House live on C-SPAN television, the Senate live on C-SPAN 2, both this week dealing with the National Defense Authorization Act. Also, both channels available on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Story from The Hill. Congressman Jared Moskowitz, Democrat from Delaware, accused the U.S. government of lying regarding its knowledge of unexplained aerial phenomena, UAP, during a House Oversight Subcommittee hearing on Tuesday. During the hearing, where several veterans testified on witnessing UAP while serving in the military, a new, never-before-seen video of an alleged UAP off the coast of Yemen in October 2024 was shown. Moskowitz, who has advocated for greater government transparency regarding UAP, said the veterans' impeccable records made it difficult for the U.S. government to continue to obfuscate the American public regarding such incidents. That was from The Hill. The hearing was held by the House Task Force on the Declassification of Federal Secrets. Here's Congressman Moskowitz questioning one of the witnesses, and Navy Senior Chief Petty Officer Alejandro Wiggins.
It's definitely clear on a bipartisan basis that we have to protect our whistleblowers. There's no doubt. And in a day in which it's really hard to tell what's true or not from a political standpoint. And so I don't really know what is true. I don't know on this subject. But I do know when we're being lied to. And we are definitely being lied to. There's just no doubt about that. Mr. Wiggins, I want to talk to you. I find your background and testimony compelling. When you first saw what you were looking at, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were, I think everything that I was told and taught as a kid and as growing adult no longer, was applicable. If I'm able to see something that I thought defies gravity in such a way, then what else could be possible? That was my first thought.
So did you think what you were looking at was a weapons program that you were unaware of, or did you think what you were looking at was obviously some extraterrestrial piece of technology?
Neither one of those crossed my mind. It was just.
How about now? What do you think it is now?
I'm not the expert. I think I want to be as skeptical as everyone else and just hope to know the information.
Anyone in the U.S. government tell you what you were looking at to try to dissuade you from what you thought it was?
No.
So no one was like, oh, there was some anomaly with the technology. No one from the government did that?
No one.
How do you think you were treated when you reported this information or have talked about, the Tic Tac video is well out there. It's well reported. How were you treated?
I've had no pushback at all. I haven't had anyone reach out to me or try to, dissuade me in either direction, militarily speaking. So I was treated fair, and I appreciate the Navy itself with assisting me with coming here to being able to testify.
That's good. So what do you think the American people should take away from watching your video, right? Because when we watch it, obviously, right, we've never seen anything like that. It defies what we know to be technologically possible. What are we supposed to think? Someone's lying about something. Someone's hiding something, right? That's not normal what you looked at.
I think what the American people should think when seeing that video, along with others before me, is that there is something out there, and we should know as the people what it is.
Navy Senior Chief Petty Officer Alejandro Wiggins, questioned by Congressman Jared Moskowitz, Democrat from Florida, at today's House Oversight Subcommittee hearing. It's the task force on the declassification of federal secrets. More from the Hill article on the hearing. Dylan Borland, a U.S. Air Force veteran, told lawmakers he faced sustained reprisals after whistleblowing about the sightings in 2023. He said he saw a 100-foot equilateral triangle made of fluid material take off from the base where he was working in 2012. Congressman Eric Burleson, Republican of Missouri, showed a video during the hearing of a flying orb struck by what he said was a Hellfire missile. The orb continued on its trajectory after the strike. George Knapp, a journalist who was among the witnesses, asked, "What the hell is that?" And Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, a Republican of Florida, who chairs the Federal Secrets Task Force, said at the start of the hearing, "We cannot maintain trust in government if we keep American people in the dark." That was all from the Hill. We covered the hearing on the C-SPAN networks. Find the video at cspan.org. And after the hearing, Congresswoman Luna, writing on X, the next task force hearing will investigate the assassination of MLK Jr. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Before we leave, we're pleased to share some C-SPAN news with you. Beginning this fall, all 3 C-SPAN networks will be available on YouTube TV and Hulu Plus Live TV. C-SPAN's availability on these streaming platforms expands access to our network's trusted, unfiltered coverage of U.S. government. We'll update you on the launch date soon for all 3 C-SPAN networks available on YouTube TV and Hulu Plus Live TV. And thank you for watching and listening wherever you follow C-SPAN. Have a good night.